start doing that, talking to people like that. But uh, a little story I enjoy talking and telling about when I first went to Ryan's, and all I was doing was tooling. Well, I was still using a little rawhide mallet to tool with, and a lot of the uh, stamp hands and a lot of the craftsmen still use those little rawhide mallets. But a few of them, especially saddle makers and saddle stamp hands, had went to, at that time it was new to me, it was called a maul. And it was just a handle with a stem with a handle on it, and then a surface, or back then it was rawhide surface that you worked it this way. Actually, it was the same way that I operate a hammer, so it wasn't that big a deal to change over. But I just wasn't putting enough pressure, oomph, onto the tool when I was tooling. And so Wendy was up there one day, and he was standing there watching me, and he said, "Son, you're going to have to do something different." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're going to have to make your tooling deeper. You want it deeper, not as smooth and flat." And most of my experience was with billfolds and belts, so I was tooling it like I would a billfold or belt. And I think I was working on my second or third saddle for the saddle maker. And he got ready to turn around and got ready to walk off, and he said, "Listen," said, "from now on," said, "when you hit that leather," said, "I want to see your butt come off of that stool." He was indicating that I needed to hit it a lot harder. So one of the younger saddle makers there was using a maul, and everybody of course heard what he said and was laughing and cutting up. And so he said, "You need to get you a maul." I said, "Okay, where do I get one?" He said, "Well, you'll have to order it." He said, "If you go down to the office and talk to so-and-so, the secretary," said, "she'll order it for you." I said, "Okay." So I went and ordered it and started using it, and my tooling improved a bunch on heavy leather. And so I've been using one ever since on heavy leather or light leather. You can get used to it, and you can control it for billfold leather or for skirting. So that's when I started making my carving a lot deeper. Billy Cook back then was making wholesale saddles, and when I was there, when I first come there, Wendy was only saddles that he sold was what we made in the shop. He might have bought a few factory saddles, but not very many. If they were, it was for children. He didn't want anything to compete with his handmade saddles. And that went on, I guess had been going the way he operated his business since he first started building saddles, which I don't know, had been a few years when I went to work for him. But evidently he figured that he was losing out on some business, and so he went and talked to Billy Cook, or Billy come and talked to him or something. Anyway, they worked out a deal. And so Billy started making saddles for him. or he started buying saddles from Billy Cook out of the factory. And when they'd come into our shop, they didn't have any conchos on them, they didn't have any stirrups, they didn't have no oil on them. And so we had to do what they call button up. That's putting the conchos on them and the stirrups and hanging all that stuff on them. And so when he started doing that, well, Wendy come and talked to me, and he said, "I got you a new job." And so I was the one that they would bring them in, and then I would have to oil them and finish them out. And so I that was good. And thought that was a good deal because I'd learned just that much more about the saddles and how they were made. I was still tooling for John, but then finishing out these saddles for Billy Cook at the same time. But Wendy would take these things and put them on the floor, and I nearly know that he was tripling his money. He would sell them for close to what the custom saddles were being made for. But they were there on the floor and ready to be sold, and a lot of people just wanted to come in and pick out a saddle and go with it. And Wendy would guarantee them just like one that we made there in the shop. Unconditional guarantee. It didn't matter if they just got it home and rode it and didn't like the feel of it. They'd ship it back and they'd give him another saddle or refund his money. So, you couldn't beat a deal like that. But boy, Wendy made a lot of money on them things. Very seldom we ever had one come back. Gosh, I've seen things, see them things go through that sure shouldn't have been made the way they were, but they had, where somebody had made a cut and the cut went too far, maybe an inch into an area where it shouldn't have. But we went ahead and put them together and put them on the floor, and they sold. But if there was any question whatsoever, Wendy would give them their money back. So they, a person couldn't lose on them. But he sold a lot of them things, man. Man, I'll tell you, a lot of them. Well, I enjoyed working for Wendy, like I said, but business started slacking off, and one day he called me to the office, and we talked a while. He talked about the saddle business slacking off and this, that, and the other, and just kept on rambling, it seems like. And I just got the feeling that he was wanting to fire me. And so I finally asked him, I said, "Wendy, are you trying to fire me?" Yeah, that's what I want. That's what it is. Said, "I'm just going to have to let you go." Said, I just don't have enough business to keep you on. Well, I knew that things were slowing down. My paycheck was getting a little smaller each week, and I was just hoping it would turn around and start doing better. But evidently he decided that he couldn't go any further. So he, by that time, the saddle that I was making for myself in my spare time was about done. And he had never given me a bill or anything for the material that I was using. I was buying the material from him. So he said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He said, "I'm going to give you the material for your saddle." He said, "That's yours." He said, "I'll give you a choice. You can either work 2 more weeks, or I'll give you 2 weeks pay and you can leave at the end of the week." Well, being the very intelligent person I was, I decided to take the money and go. And that was fine with him. And so I left, and we had been looking into the buying a dairy. A lady that we come to know, her husband had died, and she was having to run the dairy, and between her and her brother-in-law was helping her a little bit, and she didn't want to do that, so she was wanting to sell out. And so we was able to come up with the financing, and so we bought a dairy. And whoo, boy, I thought leather work was work sometimes, but with a dairy, I worked literally day and night. I'd start milking, I believe, at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would finish. It'd take me about 3.5 hours to milk. We milked anywhere from 60 to 100 head, depending on how many dry cows we had and so on and so forth. There was 80 acres of cultivation ground on the place that I was renting, and I went and leased another 100 acres of cultivation. And so I was cultivating, plowing and planting hay on 180 acres. And I would milk, go lay down for a couple of hours, take a couple of hours nap, get up, go plow or harvest or whatever we were doing at that time, come back, milk, and go in and eat the evening meal and go to the field again. And a lot of times, well, sometimes I'd take me a nap also before I took off, a couple of hours maybe. And I would work in the field, a plow or whatever, sometimes all night long in time to come back and milk the next morning. And I wasn't getting a whole lot of sleep at night. Most of my sleep was naps during the day. And I told a lot of people back then that, I think we stayed on the dairy 2 years, and I told a lot of people back then that I think I'd used up about 5 years of my life by the time I got through with that. We would raise hay and bale it. The 100 acres was 12, 15 miles from the dairy. So we would bale that and haul it in. The 80 acres on the place where the dairy was, we would, sometimes we would cut it fresh, chop it up, put it let the chopper blow it into a wagon that was built that I could just pull it in to the feedlot, and the box that held the feed was a V-shaped, and it was open at the bottom, and the bed was right underneath there, and so the cows could come in and eat out of each side of it. So I would go each morning or each evening and cut a load or 2 loads, whatever I needed, and just pull it back into the lot, the feed lot, and let them eat. And didn't have to, it was kind of easy. Well, it wasn't easier than putting out hay, but at least they had fresh feed every morning and every evening. And but the saddle that I didn't, this was when I left Ryan's and started into the dairy. I talked to Billy Cook. I knew that he let people take saddles out and stamp it home. So I called him and talked to him and told him what I was going to do and what I'd like to do. I'd like to take some of his saddles and stamp them for a while and till I got settled in on the dairy and had some money coming in. And he agreed to do that, but he also he had 5 saddles in a box there waiting on me. And he said, "You're going to dairy, huh?" I said, "Yeah." "And you're wanting us tool these saddles?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You'll never finish these 5. I said, "Well, I hope I can finish them." He said, "Well, take them and we'll see." Well, after 2 months, I realized that he was right. I had tooled about half of them. So I called him after 2 months and told him what the deal was. And he said, "Well, I figured I was right." I said, "Well, you were right." I said, "I don't want to keep them any longer and keep them out of production." I said, "I'll ship them to you." I said, "I won't charge you for anything for what I've done." I said, "You're going to have to get somebody to finish them out and clean up my mess." He said, "Okay, that sounds fair enough." So I shipped them to him, and I didn't try to do any more leather work until I left the dairy. Before I left Ryan's, I needed a birthday present for Evelyn, and so I was talking to one of the saddle makers, Bob Moline, and he was an artist, and by this time he was starting to do some oils. More than he started out just doing leather work, art on leather, and by this time he had started doing some oils. And he said, "Won't you let me fix her a picture?" I said, "That sounded like a good deal." And so that was right at the time I was leaving. That might have been just a day or two before I left Ryan's. So a week or so later, 2 weeks maybe, I had to go back in for something, and I went by and asked him if he had it ready, and he said, "No, not quite." Said, "It'll be a few more days." So a few days later, a week or so, I was back in. He said, "Yep, I got it." And he pulled out this picture, and it was a scene of a mountain lake with the mountains in the background, and it was really nice. I thought he'd done a real good job. And he told me later that that was the second oil that he ever did. He'd done one other than that one. And it was, I don't know, probably 24 inches by 18, long, narrow scene type thing. And he put a nice frame on it. And I said, "Well, how much I owe you?" And I think he had already told me what he had charged me. And he was going to charge me $25 for it. Well, just buying a dairy, that was a lot of money, but I agreed to do it because I wanted it for Evelyn. And gosh, several years later, I don't know, 10 or 15 years later, I met a art agent at a horse show. He had a booth set up, and he had 2 or 3 of Bob's paintings in it. So I got to talking to him and told him that I had the second oil that Bob had ever did. And he was really impressed. He said, "I know a man, a collector, that will probably pay good money for it because he likes Bob's old work." And I said, "Well, what do you think it's worth?" And he said, "Well, I'd have to look at it and see, but just going from what you said, said it's probably worth around $3,000. So I went home and told Evelyn, and she got a little excited. She was excited that they had appreciated that much. But she didn't think anything about selling. She wasn't ready to jump up and sell it. Well, we were on the dairy. We had this big old, well, he wasn't exactly a Palomino horse, but he was a light colored horse. And anytime I needed to go to the pasture for cows or look for a cow or sometimes just get on him and ride sometimes. Well, I was riding the saddle that I'd made while I was at Ryan's. And it was a nice saddle, even if I say so myself. It was a full carve, floral design on it. And the holding lot that we had where we would leave the cows at night, and even if we were feeding the fresh chopped feed out of the field, that's where we fed it in this one lot. It was probably 3 or 4 acres, and most of it was on top of this hill. It was all rock, and the dairy had been there for no telling how many years. There was very little drainage, and so the manure just built up on this hill. When it got wet, it was a good 6 or 8 inches thick, and you had to wear rubber boots to walk out there. And so I decided to go saddle up the old horse and go out there and bring the cows in that evening. And we had this one old cow that was a little contrary. If you tried to push her, well, she got real contrary. If you just leave her alone and let her take her time, she was all right. But I was in a hurry, I guess, and I was trying to get her to move on. So I got after her on the horse, and old horse slipped, fell on his side. Me and him and that saddle come up just almost covered with manure. And after I got the cows in and got them taken care of,